Now, we're going to put this tree in our sled. Turn the sled around. Take some of the snow off.
Hold top.
Yes, and I will hold the top because you don't want to break the top.
Well,
get some of the snow off. We have had a lot of snow. There we go. And it gets a ride in the tree, in the tree sled.
Now, Miss Polly, I see that there's a lot of little trees out here.
That's what I wanted to show you. This tree has been in the field for about 8 years, maybe a little more. But meanwhile, all these little trees, it's a ways down to the ground, have been right next to it, waiting for it to get out of its light. The first few years of a little tree in the field, they aren't doing much. They're worried about getting their roots all settled and learning their new place to grow. So they're not growing a lot. But meanwhile, they're snuggled right up to a bigger tree who we know is going to go in the next 2 or 3 years, just in time for these guys to really take off next spring. So when the spring comes, these little trees, there's another one hiding in the snow.
It takes about 8 years.
It takes about 8 years. But next year, in the spring, these little trees will really start to grow and put on, well, this was last year, and it'll put on another foot, and it'll fill out with more branches, and it will get bigger and bigger, and it'll still take another 5 years, I think, to get this tree out of the field.
Wow, that's really amazing. Another 5 years before you can cut that Christmas tree.
Well, for this one. This one's had its time.
And so tell me again about how old is this tree that we just cut?
Well, it's been in our field for 8 years. And believe it or not, it was 5 years old when we planted it, when it was only like 14 to 16 inches tall.
A 5-year-old tree is only this big.
Yeah, the heavy transplant.
So this tree has been here. So this tree is probably 7.
Yeah.
And it's going to take another.
So some of you boys and girls might be 7 years old who are watching. And this is only as tall as this Christmas tree is. So it has quite a few more years to grow.
They're little. They're little right now.
The first 5 years, they're in a nursery somewhere. The first 5 years, they're in a nursery where they're started from seeds. And,
so a nursery might be a greenhouse or somebody.
Like a little baby tree garden.
Yep.
And they're very protected, and they get a chance to grow. And then they get moved out into the field when they're bigger and stronger and better able to take field conditions like this. Because now it's normal for them. It's perfectly fine.
Yep.
But when they're little babies, a lot of them can't take all this. So it's not advantageous for us to plant seedlings out in the field. We wait until they're 5 years old, and then we move them to the field. Just like you guys don't belong in high school right now.
So boys and girls, I'm going to ask you a question, and I can't hear your answers, but I want you to think about this. Does a Christmas tree have leaves? Think about that answer just for a minute. Does a Christmas tree have leaves? So Miss Polly and Mr. Ed, what's the answer? Does a Christmas tree have leaves?
No, a Christmas tree has needles. Christmas tree has needles.
So you probably had a little bow in your box, your inquiry box. Let's take a look at those needles. You can see Miss Polly just wiped the snow off. So those aren't leaves, but they are needles that a Christmas tree grows.
And next year, these will be more branches, and it'll get longer and longer. Every one of these little buds is the start of next year's little branch.
That's amazing.
But it's sleeping right now. This is their time to sleep. Winter is a very quiet time in the Christmas tree farm.
But these are evergreens, so they don't lose their needles while they're growing out in the field. They stay green all the time. So
technically, the needles are like their leaves. They do everything that regular leaf trees do. They do all the photosynthesis. That's a big word, but that's how they make all their energy and their food. And the needles do that on an evergreen, whereas in a regular tree, it's a leaf that does that.
Well, I think this is amazing. How about we take this sled back, and maybe our boys and girls can start thinking about some questions to ask you.
They should do that.
Well, now every year we have to go around and shear all these trees so they'll have a nice shape. They don't just grow nice. We have to shear them, to shape them.
So you
pull that because you've got the saw. Good, I just get to it. all the snow.
So we have quite a bit of snow here in central New York today. Is there this much snow where you live? Think about what's going on outside.
You can explain why we shake them.
Yeah. We're going to.
Miss Polly, do you want to stop and answer some questions maybe while we're in
Sure.
here? Miss Sarah, could you get us ready for some questions?
Of course. All right. Let's start with Miss Kellogg's class. Does Miss Kellogg's class have any questions?
How do you
let's
compare?
Archie, what's your question? Did you hear that?
I haven't.
No, we couldn't hear you very well. Sorry.
How does the tree start off as a seed?
It starts off as a seed that's inside the pine cone. All evergreens have pine cones. And inside the pine cones are many little seeds. And they are planted just like you plant a garden in special little seed, what we call seedling beds. And they are allowed to germinate just like a bean or any other plant. And as they grow, they are given their own space for the first few years so that they get stronger without being nipped off by deer or whatever else is out in the field, because there's lots of things out here like bunnies and mice and stuff that like to eat tender young trees. So that's why they're in their own special garden, so that doesn't happen to them. Okay?
All right. How about another question?
How about a question from Miss Caruso's class?
Bigger kids.
Go ahead, Corinne. What's your question? Nice and loud, Corinne.
Why do these trees stay green?
Why do
Yeah.
the trees stay green?
Because they're evergreens with needles. That's why their class is known as an evergreen. They don't shed their needles every year. Eventually, they will let go of some of their older needles as they get older. But generally, these trees can stand the cold. They don't need to lose their needles every year. They're not what's called a deciduous tree. A deciduous tree is one that loses its leaves. These are evergreens. They don't. They keep them. It's just the way they are. And they have cones.
All right. How about one more question before we see the shaker?
And let's see, we'll do our one last question from Miss Smith's class. No?
No.
All right. Let's
We're
move
on our way. We're on our way to the shaker now, and this will take most of the snow off of the tree, plus any old needles that need to go that we're going to go anyway. And no, squirrels will not fly out. Ready? We're going to get covered with snow. This is the fun part. Oh, whoop, we missed. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Whoop. I can't see what I'm doing. All right. Oh. You're in.
Yeah,
Okay. You know where the switch is?
yeah, right here.
Okay. All right. Watch out, people. I'm standing back. There it is. I got
There
it.
we go.
Snow.
So now that our tree's shaken, if somebody came here, they bought their tree and they had all the extra needles taken off through the shaker and the snow.
Yeah,
What
there's
do
a
you
bunch of people.
next?
Yeah, because this isn't our time slot though.
You can see it's going back into the sled,
We'll wrap it.
and now it's time to wrap it.
So that you get it in your house and it doesn't get any branches broken when you drive home.
So this machine here is called a baler, is that right?
Yep. Baler. And this cable's gonna pull the tree right through that funnel.
So you can see Miss Polly is grabbing that cable.
Truth, I've let the cable do a lot of that work.
She's wrapping it around the base of the
So
tree.
it doesn't fall off.
You can see it's still sitting in the sled.
Tie the string on now.
And so can you see what happened, boys and girls? Mr. Ed, he tied the string at the bottom of the tree here. They pulled it through the baler, and you can see this white string wrapped all the way around the Christmas tree. And then
Holds the branches in so they don't get broken. And now it looks like a great big tube and it's easier to handle.
Get in your house and stand.
Yep, you can see the bottom so you can get it in the stand correctly.
because what's something that's really important about Christmas, having a live Christmas tree at home that makes it so special, you have to keep it watered all the time, right? And why is
Right.
that?
Well, the tree needs to drink. It's been outside in the cold and it'll get in your house and it'll warm up and go, oh my gosh, I'm thirsty. And so it will drink quite a lot of warm, especially warm water the first time.
It'll stay fresh and it'll smell really nice.
Yep. And
Real trees
it will
smell
last a
real
long
nice.
time.
Yeah.
Trees need to be watered, just like cut flowers, just like any other plant that you bring in your house. It needs to be watered. It doesn't need any other funny stuff added to it because it's not, this is its sleepy time of year. It's not growing. So it only needs water. That's all it is. And you put your lights on it and a fresh tree will not burn. So you keep it fresh.
So
And after you're done using it, you can take it and have it ground up into mulch. And that mulch becomes soil and the whole process starts right over again.
Totally recyclable.
Totally recyclable. And while they're growing, they're giving off a lot of oxygen. We all need oxygen to breathe, so it's got to come from someplace. I think we take it for granted sometimes that there's unlimited oxygen out there, but there isn't.
And plants make oxygen.
And young growing Christmas trees give off a lot of oxygen, so we
There's
need
your
that.
tree.
So real trees are definitely the best way to go.
and why, so a real tree is a perfect thing to have in your home this season. Some people do choose artificial trees. What's the benefit of a live Christmas tree versus an artificial Christmas tree?
Well, first off, a real tree is not poisonous. An artificial tree is, every ingredient in an artificial tree pretty much is a carcinogen, cancer causing. They never biodegrade. They go in a landfill, they're in there forever. They're not made in the USA. You know, these trees are all grown right here, so you're supporting, you know, American businesses.
And during the year, a Christmas tree farm is home to a lot of other things. Rabbits, deer, hawks, owls, lots of birds. We have more songbirds than you ever knew. But this is their home. It's shelter for them, it's protection for them, and in between the rows is all the grass they can eat. So this is an ongoing good environmental choice. I understand if a family has a real problem with allergies or something that they have to go to artificial. But convenience shouldn't be one of them.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing inconvenient to
A
me
fresh-
about a real tree.
A fresh cut tree will not burn, whereas an artificial tree, because all the ingredients are somehow related to petroleum, it'll burn right out of the box.
So environmentally speaking, the fresh tree is part of the cycle of life
Yeah.
and not outside of it. So
I think that's great. Why don't we take just a couple more questions before we hop inside?
Sure.
All right, Miss Sarah, why don't you feel free to call up the next class?
Of course. Does Miss Nolan's class have any questions?
Okay, raise your hand if you have a question. We got to unmute ourselves. Oh, we're unmuted. Ray, go ahead. What's your question? What? Loud. What about green trees, honey? The green trees have needles. Michael, do you have a question?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
it's just about feeling well about the trees.
What about the trees?
The trees feel like prickers, but they still have
Lord.
a circle ending on the.
Okay, we're looking for questions. Questions have an answer. I'm so sorry. This is who has a question? Paisley, you have a question?
How do they grow?
How do they grow?
How do they grow?
well, that's a good question. I think you might have to ask them. They grow like any other plant. Some of the trees have softer needles, some of the trees have longer needles, and some of them the trees have very bitey needles. Those are not the ones you want in your house.
It's genetics. There's a lot of different kinds.
And they just grow at their own pace. Every year they put out, in your box, you will have a little piece of a branch. If you look very closely on the end of your branch, there are, I'll see if I can find one on here. There might be buds, I can't see one on this, near the tip. Here we go. See, this is a bud. That little bump on the branch is a bud. That is going to be a branch next year. So next spring, when the tree wakes up, that will break open and start to grow with a whole bunch of little needles, and it'll get longer and longer and longer and be a branch. All these buds up here are going to be branches. All of these buds, well, they were going to be branches. And this is going to be a new end where you get the 3 branches together. And these on the sides will be side branches. So those are their buds. Just like a flower has a bud, they have buds on their branches.
Good question. How about one more question from another
Okay.
classroom?
Does Miss Hewlett's class have a question for us?
Okay, go ahead. You're right.
Oh, older kids.
What kind of trees are there?
Oh, there are a lot of different trees. The tree we cut today was a Fraser fir. It's related to balsams and canons and a whole bunch of other firs. There are 3 classes of families of evergreens. Pines, which usually have longer needles. Spruce, which have the prickly bitey needles. And firs, which are spelled F-I-R, but their needles are soft. So if you hear the word fir, just think it's going to be a soft, friendly tree. So this was a Fraser fir. It's a tree that really likes to grow where it's cold, where it's high, and where it's dry. And that happens to be where I live. It is cold.
Do you grow all 3 of those types of trees on your farm?
We actually do.
We actually do.
We actually do. They have different uses, like the spruces, because they don't hold their needles. They're not good for Christmas trees.
But they're excellent in
But
your yard
we
because
do.
deer don't eat them.
You know, we have them in our tree maze. And we have pines growing that we use the pine for making arrangements with, you know,
Decorative, more
reeds and
decorative
roping,
greens.
yeah.
Pines have a hard time holding a heavy ornament. So most people don't like them all that much for in their house because they get kind of droopy looking, but they look great in roping and wreaths. So that's why we grow them.
Great, good questions. Now we're going to go inside and we're going to see our last piece of action for today, which is going to be making a wreath.
Oh, yeah. Come on in. We got heat in here.
Oh, it's nice and warm in here. So we'll just show you a little bit of Springside Farms, their kind of workshop where they're heating area. So you can see this is where Mr. Ed's going to make a wreath for us. They have quite a bit of stockpile over here. We'll talk about that. They have a gift shop and ribbons. They also have a snack station, which is if you're visiting with your family, you can get some hot cocoa or some fudge or snacks here. And then they have birthday parties in here. And here's a place where you can take a picture with your family after you get your Christmas tree. So
we do make other things other than just wreaths. This is what they call a kissing ball right there.
No kissing necessary.
No kissing necessary. And this is garland or roping. And you can see this is some of the white pine in there. And it makes it look fluffier and nicer. So we make other things, but mostly we make wreaths. Mr. Ed is our head wreath maker. He makes an awful lot of wreaths every year.
So I see you have a lot of boughs over here and cuttings.
Correct.
Where do those come from?
The bottoms of trees that people didn't want because they wanted a slightly shorter tree or they needed more room under the tree for packages. And sometimes, and you might have seen it when we cut that tree, some of the bottom branches, because they don't get as much light, aren't as pretty, but there's still parts that we can use. So we take them off for them, and this is all the leftovers. And goodness knows there's no such thing as a leftover around here. Something's going to be made out of it.
And this machine right here takes these clamps, and when I step on it with my foot, it pushes it together. That's what bends these little clamps together.
Let me get a picture of that. So down here at the bottom, I can see your foot moving, and that lever will close the
jaws.
clamps.
That closes the jaws right there. And once we get some greens in there, it'll help them hold them right in place.
Now he's going to put some greens in there, but all of them start out on a rigid form so the thing stays round. You can do this with the wire, but you have to be very careful with just a hand wire like this. But you have to be very careful that the things don't spin on the circle. So the clamp keeps the wreath nice and flat. And this ring determines how big your wreath is going to be. He's making a small wreath right now.
Yeah, so you get a handful of greens like that. You got probably 6 or 8 different pieces. Set them down in this ring right here. And now we're going to clamp it together. And that's going to hold it right in place. Now it's going to stay right there. So now when I pick it up, it all stays together. It's like that. And we just keep going right around and until we fill all the clamps up. And then we'll have a wreath.
And the last one's the hardest one because he's got to sneak it in under the first one. So Mr. Ed is making wreaths. And then all the decorations that we put on wreaths and the different color ribbons. People's going to ask us for specific colors. And we put pine cones on and all sorts of different things. There are a couple of finished wreaths over there, one plain and one decorated.
So here's one plain wreath, just with a bow. You may have received one of those wreath rings and a bow in your inquiry box. And then this one is decorated. So you can see the different ornaments and the pine cones and a little more pizzazz on the ribbon. So these are all things that they can make and add to your wreath.
At one time, we will have 3 or 4 people making wreaths and kissing balls here earlier in the season. By now, most of you are getting close to being ready for Christmas, so you've already got all your stuff. So this is a good time for us to do this classroom visit because it's not quite as crazy around here now. We're getting there. It's almost Christmas, you know.
So, Miss Sarah, I think we can answer a couple more questions while we make this wreath. Who's next on the list?
All right. Do we have a question from Miss Knapp's class?
Go ahead, say a question. We're unmuted. Go ahead. Nice and
How
loud.
are the trees green?
I'm sorry, what was the
How are
question?
the trees green?
Chlorophyll.
There's a pigmentation in their needles called chlorophyll. It's the same thing that makes regular leaves on regular trees green, except they never lose it. They get to keep it all year long. They're a different tree. They're a kind of tree that the cold doesn't bother. The other trees, when it gets really cold and it frosts, it kills the leaves. These guys don't die when it gets cold. You know, outside at your bird feeder, there's some birds that stay here all year and other birds that fly south. I don't know why one kind is chickadees are perfectly happy here all winter and robins take off at the first sign of snow. So it's part of the miracle of life. Everything is different and we celebrate the differences.
All right, thank you. Miss Sarah, next question. Who's up?
Does Miss Erickson's class have a question for us?
He's getting to the tricky part now.
Yes. Go ahead, Jonah. Jonah, right here. The camera's
And
right
there's
here.
your reef, right there.
We found
Okay.
And it gets a bow.
Jonah, you gotta
Ooh,
ask.
this is a little bow.
Phone's there. Just look at
we found this thing in our
inquiry box.
inquiry box. And we don't
What
know
did you find?
this chicken.
It looks like a little rattle.
Oh, and you shaked that little rattle, right? What do you think that means? If we put a little rattle that shakes in your inquiry box, what do you think that relates to that we already saw? All right, let's see. I see lots of hands up. So somebody answer that for me.
Go ahead. Are they from the buds?
No, I think Miss Kate, I think she was going for the shaker.
The shaker. Remember,
Outside.
they put the tree on the shaker and the tree shook.
Okay.
Got all the extra needles off. So that's why you might have had a rattle in your inquiry box.
It has nothing to do with Christmas tree.
Nothing to do with a Christmas tree. But we do shake it and you shake the rattles, trying to make some connections there. All right, Miss Sarah, how about another question?
Does YPS have a question for us?
Nice antlers.
Do we have a question?
Yes.
All right, say it nice and loud for us.
How long does it take to get there?
How long does it take to get what?
Say the end part again.
How long does a tree take to grow?
How long can a tree grow? How long does it take for a tree to grow?
Years old. You count from seed. How long does it take to grow? These trees will keep growing if we didn't cut them. We have some 20-footers here that are still growing every spring. Really big trees.
All right, we'll take another question. Miss Sarah, let us know when we get to through all of our classrooms.
Okay. Does Miss Zapia's class have a question for us?
Yes, it's cute. I told you she was gonna pronounce it. Go ahead.
How does that wreath thing, how does it clip it together?
Okay.
Well, I'll show you. We'll just take one.
One more look.
Here's a ring. Hasn't got any greens on it, okay? So you put this, when these jaws come together, they're gonna bend these clamps right over.
Watch.
So I'll just do it without any greens in there and you can watch it, okay? So here it goes. We're gonna bend it right over.
Pretend that's the greens.
It's being bent. See how it's starting to bend? And then those jaws, I don't need that in there.
Okay.
Then these jaws keep right on going. and they push it right over like that.
as far as they can.
And if there was anything in there, that's what would be holding it, just like that.
Pinched right in.
It pinches the branches so that it holds them right nice and tight. And you do that all the way around, depending on how big your wreath is. Some of them only have 6 clamps, some of them have 30, depending on how big the wreath is.
Because we do make the really big ones too.
Yeah.
And who usually buys those really, really big wreaths?
People with barns, if they want to have a nice outside look to their barn.
Businesses that want to put a big
Businesses.
wreath on the outside.
Yeah.
And it's important that they have a real one. So yes, there are a few, not a lot. Most people buy the smaller wreaths, so that's what we make the most of.
But we make about 500 wreaths here, then we make 80 of the kissing balls.
And lots of feet of roping.
Yeah, lots of garland like this. Here's garland that we made.
Yeah.
Got different kinds of needles. See, that has the pine. The pine is the longer needle. It's like a white pine. And you got your Fraser fir in there. You blend it all together and it looks really nice.
All right. How about another question?
All right, this time let's hear from Miss Wilson's class.
So we were wondering how large your tree farm is and how many new trees you plant each year.
Oh, good question. We plant about 10,000 trees every spring. In April, we're planting the little, not including their roots, about this tall little trees, 10,000 of them every spring. We have 3 tree farms, actually. This one here is about 30 acres. We have another one also about 30, 40 acres up on the hill. And then we have another one that's 9 miles away, but Fraser fir don't like to grow there. So you have to plant a tree where it wants to grow. In that 3rd tree farm, it does not like it there. So
now you also don't just do Christmas trees. So Christmas trees is just one part of your business.
correct.
What are some other things that you grow or raise for your farm?
Do you want to do it?
Well, we have corn for the corn maze. We have willow for our what we call our jungle maze.
We have pumpkins, a
pumpkins.
lot in the fall. We do pumpkin patch and corn maze in the fall. We have some blueberries that will be here for you pick this summer. On our farm across the valley where our livestock live, we have sheep and we have a few goats and we have some alpacas, and we will be having lambs starting in February this year. So there's always something going on. It just depends on the season.
How about another question, Miss Sarah? Do we have some classrooms who haven't gone yet?
Yes, we do. It looks like Miss Forrest's class really has something to say, so let's hear from them.
What a good name.
Okay. After you cut the tree and put it in your house, how long, like what are some ways to make it last longer in your
How
house?
can you make your tree last longer once you get it in your house?
Well, you buy, first off, it starts with buying the right kind of tree. And a Fraser fir will last for months and months and months. In fact, we've got one that we use to demonstrate needle retention that was cut 5 years ago and still has its needles. They just turn brown after a while.
Water.
Water is the main thing.
If you get a tree off of a Christmas tree lot, you don't know when that tree was cut.
You can
And
ask.
You can ask, but a cut on the stump is like a cut on your hand. It seals over in a matter of hours. So what you want to do is make a new cut about this far up from the old one. So you have a fresh cut on the bottom, and right away, put it in really toasty warm water and make sure it stays watered. That is the number one thing you do. A fresh cut and lots of water, and make sure it stays watered. And it should stay up, if it's a fir, it should stay up for a long, long time.
You don't put it in front of your fireplace or over a heater. You know, you don't want it to dry out like that. Keep it somewhere.
But keep it where it's a little cool and it gets lots of water. Now, if it's a prickly tree, if you're only going to have the tree up for a short time, that's okay. But prickly trees can't last. When I was a kid, we only put our trees up for 2 weeks. Prickly trees can do that. They can't put them up on Thanksgiving and last until Christmas. So you have to get a fir. any kind of fir, F-I-R. If we spelled it with a U, you would understand they're soft needles. So get a fir if you want to leave it up for a really long time. And for goodness sake, keep it watered after it's fresh cut.
Great question. How about another question?
Does Miss Audain's class have a question for us?
But you're on, you know you're gonna get a question.
Everybody, live, come. Okay, that's the question.
Can evergreen trees grow in tropical climates?
Evergreen trees grow in a tropical climate.
I don't think pines will tolerate that, but spruce and firs, no. They like it cold in the winter. You can get them in your yard and stuff, and you might be able to get them to put up with it. But it's not their first choice. They prefer cold. A lot of trees are like that, actually. Maple trees like to have winter. You don't find some trees in different parts of the country because it's either too hot or too cold. There are trees we can't grow up here too. So it all depends on the tree, but I'm pretty sure most firs are not keen on living down south.
Your best Christmas trees.
Your best Christmas trees don't do that.
Great question for one of our New York City classrooms. We appreciate that great question. How about another question, Miss Sarah?
Of course. Does Miss Briggs' class have a question they'd like to ask us?
We were wondering how long you've been tree farmers.
About 37 years.
Feels like forever. But no, long time. We really love the trees. We used to have a dairy, so we did both for a long time. But in about 2003, we decided we would concentrate just on the Christmas trees. And then we started pumpkins and all kinds of other things too. So life is about change, but the Christmas trees have been a constant for 36 years.
Good question, Miss Briggs.
All right. And does Miss Soroka's class have a question for us? No?
Okay.
That's okay. All right. And did I miss anyone? Or I think we might have gotten through everyone.
That's wonderful. Well, we just are going to turn this around quick and say, we really enjoyed cutting down a tree with you today.
Yes.
We really like shaking that tree, baling that tree, and then making a wreath from the trimmings of many, many Christmas trees that come through your farm. So I think this was a really wonderful learning experience for all of our students, and we can't thank you enough for letting us come and visit Springside Farm. Thank you so much.
Well, you're welcome.
You're very welcome. We couldn't get you here any other way. This is wonderful.
If you have a chance, figure out how to get here and come visit us.
We'd love to have you here. So thank you so much, boys and girls, for joining us on our virtual field trip. We hope you have a great day and a great holiday break.
Merry Christmas.
Bye.
Thank you.
Wait, no.
All right.
Oh, it's your
Yeah, that's
What are you writing? What's your question? Just tell me and I'll do it.
choose your tan colors.
What? It's not working.
All right.
You already are.
Oh, okay. What? What's the